Mr. President, members of the Council, ladies and gentlemen, thank you first of all for inviting me tonight. It's a great honour and I feel humbled by it. It's not the first time I've been asked to inflict myself upon you. I think we all enjoyed Sarah Grace's opening description of hot wax shoved into your urethra. What else were scrotums nailed to headboards, the creative use of fishhooks. It certainly made us wince, which was fun, though you sense that maybe Miss Grace was a little envious of the scrotum thing. Not sure. But then the array of her learned arguments over the following 6 pages all got to me a little bit, shall we say, tortuous. And I have to say, way out of my league. She's a lawyer, and I'm an engineer. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, who has heard of a Frenchman called Donatien Alphonse François? Well, me neither. Till early this week when I had to start preparing for this event. Now, apparently in 1785, while he was in prison for poisoning a prostitute and sodomizing a manservant, as you do, he somehow procured a 12-meter roll of toilet paper, and on it he wrote a tome. He wrote a tome which he later extolled. He said this was the most impure tale that has ever been told since our world began. It recounts a jolly jape, torture, rape, sodomy, coprophagia, and murder. It was called 120 Days of Sodom, or the School of Libertinism. What's that? You don't know what coprophagia is? Oh, well, just ask the TV journalist Martin Bashir, he of Princess Diana fame, whose career only last month crashed and burned by his own hand when he recommended a dose of coprophagia for Sarah Palin. Now, he was outraged because Sarah Palin had dared to say that America's $250 billion of debt will one day have to be repaid, and that will be a painful process. So he wanted someone to defecate into her copiously lipsticked maw, and that's what coprophagia is. Anyway, coming back to Donatien Alphonse François, he is the author of 120 Days of Sodom. He's, of course, better known as the Marquis de Sade. We all know the Marquis de Sade. I didn't know his name was François. Anyway, and this book that he wrote tells us exactly what sadism is, a practice which we graciously perpetuate his name through. So in short, I'll tell you what sadism is. In short, 4 guys with plenty of money and lots of libido, they assemble together their own daughters, assorted prostitutes, 16 virginal children, several men renowned for their monumental appendages, 4 old women, and of course a motley crew of caterers. And then they lock everybody up. There are about 50 of them in all. They lock them up in a distant secret castle in France for 5 months. Now, in the pursuit of sexual highs for the 4 organizers, the consequent festivities, they begin with simple pleasures such as masturbation, drinking urine, eating feces, that's the coprophagia. And after another month, they move on to child rape, incest, flagellation, sodomy of men, women, children. Then it's ripping off a few fingers, regular whippings and stuff done with red-hot pokers you don't want to know about. And the final month is spent skinning children alive, disemboweling pregnant women, and torturing teenage girls to death. So now that we know what sadism is, we can understand why the noble Marquis, who practiced a slightly more moderate form whenever he could get away with it, which, by the way, wasn't very often because he spent 32 of his 74 years in jail, we can understand why he ended his days in a lunatic asylum. But one thing we can certainly conclude is that adult and consensual are 21st century concepts that have no place in the world of sadism. Personally, I don't know too much about the world of sadism. I can't claim great expertise in the field of inflicting and suffering pain, although I do recall several agonizing beatings with a wispy bamboo cane across my backside when I was a schoolboy. However, despite the thick red welts that ended up there and were left behind, sadly these thrashings were associated with no sexual pleasure, at least not for me. Do you dispute my sexual pleasure? Or lack of?
Actually, maybe I do. maybe I do.
Yeah.
So supposing somebody remembering those thrashings upon his buttocks from his childhood,
Yes.
then decide that he wanted these to be repeated in his adulthood when he is himself in a position of being an adult, would you deprive him of the ability to legally avail of that?
I would certainly deprive myself of the ability to easily avail of more of those thrashings of my childhood. But I have to say, in retrospect, by the way, those punishments on each occasion were totally deserved. But anyway, we talked about S&M. What about the other half of the S&M? Well, we go back to history. The 19th century, Leopold Ritter von Sacher-Masoch, where do these guys get their names, for God's sake? He was an Austrian writer and a journalist, and he gained renown for his romantic stories of life in Galicia. Yet the sport to which he bestowed half his name, masochism, mainly derives from only one short, semi-autobiographical novel among the many that he wrote. Now, this thoroughly disreputable 1869 book that he wrote, he called it Venus in Furs, about a lovely lady in furs, with a whip, on a train. So that rather mild or even coquettish title puts me in mind of an old song by Sophie Tucker. Sophie Tucker was a huge, larger-than-life Jewish burlesque singer and comedian from the 1900s, and she once sang about a lady and furs. When am I getting the mink, Mr. Fink? It's about time, Mr. Fink, don't you think? You made a deal with me, and I kept it faithfully. So when am I getting the mink, Mr. Fink? You promised to bring me the mink in July. It's 3 months overdue, and so am I. And you know that such a thing can be most embarrassing. So when am I getting the mink, Mr. Fink? But I digress. For Herr Sacher-Masoch had no such innocent pursuits in mind when it came to his own Venus in mink. In the book, the hero, i.e. himself, he signs a 6-month contract with a beautiful lady to be her slave. He wants to be her slave, and while she has to wear furs, wield the whip, bring him on a train journey, and generally be cruel, bit like the old adage, wear pink and act tough. So it seems his greatest sexual pleasure, fantasy, and fetish was to be subjugated and humiliated by a dominant woman with a taste for furs, flagellation, and freight cars. Though what transpired in the privacy of a first-class railway carriage doesn't quite convey the same frisson as locking 50 folk up in a castle for 5 months, and from which only a few of them stagger out alive. By the way, this chap, Herr Sacher-Masoch, he also ended up in a lunatic asylum, just like the first half of the particular mode of S&M gymnastics that they both independently and unknowingly invented. And I have to just mention the lovely Marianne Faithfull. Did you know that, well, she was one-time lover of Mick Jagger and pretty much everyone else in 1960s swinging London. She is actually part of the spawn of the same Leopold, a granddaughter or something, but don't worry, I won't sing any of her dreadful songs, though maybe someone else's. Anyway, to wander back to the subject, we've established a couple of things. First, the Sado part of S&M is pretty nasty. It involves grown men and women together with pre-teens and teens, preferably locked up and unable to escape, but with men setting the agenda and doing most of the business. And the business primarily, as we heard, involves rape, the lash, sodomy, torture, and murder. Secondly, there's no such thing as a consensual act of sadism between adults, no. As tonight's anodyne motion posits, if it's consensual, it's not sadism. If it's only between adults, it's not sadism. So hands up if you still think sadism should be legal. Oh, okay. Cheers, I'm glad I'm not a child any longer. Anyway, so now let's look at masochism with this raccoon pelts riding crops and railways. This does indeed seem to involve both free adults and free will, that's true. And I would be inclined, therefore, to allow it a little bit of legal leeway, were it not for one thing, well, actually 2 persons. Max Mosley, of Formula One fame, he with a penchant for masochistic basements and humiliation and handcuffs and whips and women in leather. And of course his disreputable dad, Oswald Mosley, Britain's erstwhile premier fascist and Hitler lover. So frankly, I think anything embraced by that inglorious pair should automatically be ruled out of bounds, no matter how smart the Nazi uniforms they wear look. So I invite you to vote down this wretched motion, but not without an old S&M joke. What did the masochist say to the sadist? Beat me, enchain me, humiliate me. What did the sadist reply? No. And I can't let you go without a few lines from Ton Lira's Masochism Tango. I did threaten you, ringing in your heads as you cast your no votes. I ache for the touch of your lips, dear, but much more for the touch of your wits, dear. You can rise welts like nobody else as we dance to the Masochism Tango. Let our love be a flame, not an ember. Say it's me that you want to dismember. Blacken my eyes, set fire to my ties as we dance to the Masochism Tango. Thank you.